Good afternoon, dear friends. You are on the channel Military Reporter, and we are still with you in a daily format of studying the situation on the front. On March 7th, the Russian side entered the next stage of assault operations in this direction. Overall, according to many military experts, the situation in the Sudzha Salient is approaching its logical conclusion. There is a very high probability that within a few weeks, the Sudzha grouping of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, AFU, will either retreat completely from the Kursk region or find itself in full encirclement. Well, now let's go through everything step by step. We will start with the area along the border between Nikolaevka and Sverdlikovo, as well as the settlements of Zuravka, Basavka, and Novenko. According to various neutral cartographic services, over the past 24 hours, the Russian army has significantly expanded its control zone. A powerful bridgehead has already been established on the Ukrainian side of the border. The Russian side has taken control of a large number of forest plantations from both the northwest and from the north or northeast. If Ukraine loses control over Basavka, it will mark the physical severing of Highway 07, which connects the Sumy region with the settlement of Sudzha. Although there is still no direct physical control over the highway, the Russian side has already established a firm grip on this sector of the front using FPV drones. The AFU is suffering catastrophic losses, and today, the first reports emerged that some units have begun withdrawing from the Sudzha direction. The Ukrainian side is gradually beginning evacuation, pulling out soldiers and units. Let's discuss whether this information is accurate or not. Next, we move towards the northern encirclement in the direction of Malaya Loknya. This area is seeing the most significant updates to the front line. Let's compare the map over different dates. Just yesterday, the map of the Malaya Loknya agglomeration looked like this. This area includes several villages, Staraya Sorokina, Nikolaevka, Viktorovka, and the settlement of Malaya Loknya itself. However, as of the evening of March 7, reports indicate that all the villages surrounding Malaya Loknya have come under full Russian control. In these footage, we can see Russian soldiers raising the flag in the northern part of Staraya Sorokina. There are also images of a Russian soldier raising the flag in Nikolaevka. This confirms that the Ukrainian side has indeed abandoned this side of the Malaya Loknya River. Currently, Ukrainian forces are attempting to regroup and organize defenses around the former women's colony. The key question remains, are the AFU maneuvers aimed at establishing a long-term defense, or is this merely a reorganization before a full retreat from the northern salient? Additionally, today, the official channel of the Sever military grouping confirmed that Viktorovka and Nikolaevka have been taken under control during combat operations. Based on all these reports, map adjustments have been made. At this moment, the Russian side has effectively reached the Malaya Loknya River, which divides the bridgehead into two parts. The next objective for the Russian army is to cross this river, after which battles for Malaya Loknya itself will begin. We expect that in the near future, the offensive towards Malaya Loknya will develop from the north along the railway, as well as from the forested areas and fields. The main goal of these attacks is to close the distance as much as possible and effectively place Malaya Loknya in a fire pocket, and thus, forcing Ukrainian units to retreat southward, where, during this withdrawal across open fields and vast distances, the majority of AFU equipment will likely be destroyed. The situation here is extremely critical, and it appears it will be resolved within a few days. The most significant and important footage and information today are coming from the southern part of the Sudzha Salient. To begin with, the road here is completely under the fire control of the Russian armed forces. Today, another series of videos and reports was published, documenting the destruction of AFU equipment on one of the main supply routes between Sudzha and the Sumy region. Furthermore, neutral and pro-Ukrainian cartographic services have significantly altered the map in this sector in favor of the Russian Federation. This is how the map looked as of March 6, 2024. But by the evening of March 7, we can see that the Russian army managed to break through the AFU defense and reach the supply route leading from the settlement of Sudzha toward the settlement of Myropilya. In effect, this road has now been completely severed and is under full fire control. It is no longer possible for Ukrainian units to use it. Only one road remains, Highway 07. However, we can see that Russian soldiers are steadily advancing in this direction from Sverdlovskovo and Nikolaevka. If we summarize and roughly estimate the distance between the southern and northwestern encirclements of the Russian army, it is no more than 12 km. That is practically nothing at this point. Now, we move to the Kupiansk direction, from which a huge amount of information is also coming in. I remind you that over the past few days, we have repeatedly discussed AFU counterattack attempts between Dvyureknya and Zapadnoy. According to neutral and pro-Ukrainian cartographic sources, the Ukrainian side did manage to regain control over certain sections of the front. However, today, the initiative is once again in Russia's hands. According to various footage and data, the Russian side has also launched a decisive offensive, significantly expanding its control zone over the past 24 hours. The main advance is occurring closer to the border between the settlements of Krasnaya Pervaya and Kamenka. At least, this information has been published by various neutral cartographers, as well as both pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian sources. There is intense pressure, a straightening of the front line, and an expansion of the Russian bridgehead on the Ukrainian side of the Oskol River. It appears that the Russian side is moving into the decisive storming phase. Moreover, very interesting reports are coming from the central Kupiansk direction. Yesterday, some pro-Russian sources reported that during the assault operations, Russian army units managed to cross the Oskol River and establish a foothold in the settlement of Sinkovo. Today, this information was partially confirmed by neutral cartographers, although adjustments to the front line have not yet been officially recorded, as it remains unclear whether Russian forces have fully secured their positions on the Ukrainian side of the Oskol River. At the moment, it is likely that Russia is attempting to expand its bridgehead in order to push Ukrainian formations out of the settlement. If Russian forces manage to fully consolidate their hold on Sinkovo, it can be stated with confidence that in the near future, an encirclement of Kupiansk from both the south and north will begin. Overall, we can assume that Russia will attempt the following maneuver in the near future: an attack on Highway R79 from the south, and an assault on Kupiansk from the north along the same highway. In the coming days, we expect a sharp increase in the intensity of combat operations in this area. Next, we move to the Siversk direction. Here, there has been a slight adjustment of the front line in the area of the settlement of Bilohorivka. Footage from the 81st Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, recorded for objective control, has been published. This footage shows FPV, first-person view, drones striking Russian assault groups attempting to advance westward toward the settlement of Hryhorivka. The strikes targeted this road, and based on this footage, cartographers made slight adjustments to the map. At the same time, it is reported that forest areas and shrublands in this region are also under the control of the Russian army. Chasiv Yar direction. Next, we move toward the settlement of Chasiv Yar, from where, arguably, the most interesting and intriguing footage, as well as the most important information, is coming in. To begin with, in the past 24 hours, the Russian army has launched a decisive assault on the northwestern part of the settlement. During a massive attack using a large amount of equipment and personnel, Russian forces managed to cross the railway and completely clear the northwestern part of Chasiv Yar. This has been confirmed by objective control footage published by the Ukrainian side. The footage shows a large column of Russian equipment crossing the Siversk-Donetsk Canal at night. Additionally, it is visible that the Russian column almost completely crosses the railway in the northwestern part of the settlement without significant losses. The Ukrainian side began striking only after Russian units had already entered the area that was previously under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. It is possible that this delayed response was due to the United States ceasing to provide Ukraine with intelligence data. Again, strikes on the Russian column began only at the stage of crossing the railway. In other words, while Russian forces were moving through the northern districts of Chasiv Yar and crossing the Siversky-Donetsk Canal, no strikes were conducted. This was a serious miscalculation by the armed forces of Ukraine. As a result, the central part of Chasiv Yar is now effectively under operational encirclement. Although the Ukrainian forces may still have evacuation and rotation routes through forested areas, all movements occur at minimal distances and under the fire control of Russian units. Given the breakthrough in the northwestern and western parts of Chasiv Yar, there is a high probability that within the next 24 hours, all territory east and northeast of the Red Line will come under full Russian control. This would essentially mean the fall of Chasiv Yar and the beginning of battles for the Kostiantynivka agglomeration. The armed forces of Ukraine seemingly attempted a counterattack from the north to slow the Russian advance. However, all equipment, depots, and temporary deployment points of Ukrainian units were promptly identified and destroyed. It is possible that the Ukrainian side no longer has the resources to conduct a complex and successful counteroffensive. #Toretsk direction. Next, we move toward the settlement of Toretsk, from where ambiguous objective control footage published by the Ukrainian side has also emerged. The footage shows a series of FPV drone strikes. Notably, one of the drones struck a tree line located north of the settlement of Shevchenkov. Ukrainian FPV operators targeted this area, which may indicate that a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group managed to advance northward along the Kryvyi Torets River, possibly with the aim of establishing fire control over the main roads in this sector. It is also possible that Russian unit positions were detected and subsequently targeted by Ukrainian strikes. Currently, we see that the focus of drone deployment is gradually shifting northward. Despite the initial difficulties and setbacks of the Ukrainian counteroffensive in Toretsk, the situation is now stabilizing. The Russian army is once again pushing Ukrainian forces northward, in the direction of Kostiantynivka. #Pokrovsk direction. Next, we move to the Pokrovsk direction, where combat operations continue along the entire perimeter. However, the situation here is not as favorable for the Russian Federation as in other sectors. The armed forces of Ukraine are actively counterattacking, and their counteroffensive actions are beginning to yield results. Let's start with the settlement of Udakny. Today, some cartographers, mostly pro-Ukrainian or neutral, indicate that the settlement of Udakny has been completely cleared by Ukrainian forces and is now under their control. As recently as yesterday, the southeastern part of the settlement was marked by most cartographers as being under Russian control. However, today, the first reports have surfaced suggesting that Russian units may have been forced to retreat. We can now see that the Ukrainian side has almost managed to neutralize the success of the Russian army achieved in the first days of the offensive on Pokrovsk. This means that the settlement of Udakny is gradually returning under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. Furthermore, fighting continues in the settlement of Pishchane. An increasing amount of objective control footage is emerging from this area. At present, battles are taking place for the mine. There is footage confirming the presence of Ukrainian soldiers at this location. Additionally, I would like to remind you that earlier, reports indicated that Ukrainian formations had entered the southeastern part of the settlement of Shevchenkov. Today, even some pro-Russian cartographers acknowledge that the entire northeastern part of Shevchenkov is also under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. As we discussed earlier, there is a high probability that if the situation does not change in the near future, this entire area, including the northern salient, as well as the territories located further north and beyond the Yellow Line, could come back under Ukrainian control. At the very least, the Ukrainian side is doing everything possible to make this happen. It is worth noting that this region contains a significant number of mines, which may have been included or could potentially be included in the Rare Earth Resources Agreement between the United States and Ukraine. If we look slightly further east, in the area of Sudzha Yar and Lysivka, new footage suggests that Russian forces have managed to slightly expand their zone of control. Active battles are ongoing for Lysivka. In this sector of the front, for now at least, the situation is developing in favor of the Russian Federation. Next, we move toward the Bohdair direction, where a lot of interesting information is also coming in. Let's start with adjustments to the front line. As recently as yesterday, the map looked as follows. The Russian side had just completed the clearance of the settlement of Andrivka along the perimeter. Russian forces were still far from the eastern part of Kostiantynivka. However, today the map has changed dramatically. The first thing that stands out is the advance of Russian units northwest of Andrivka, aiming to eliminate a small salient between Zaporizhia and Andrivka. Further advancement of the Russian army is also noted from the settlement of Yulikli toward Kostantinivka. It appears that Russian forces have secured positions on the very outskirts of the settlement, specifically on Solnikhnaya Street. On the other hand, reports indicate that the Ukrainian side has carried out a series of successful counterattacks, allowing them to regain control over the southwestern and southern parts of the settlement. Such maneuvers and close-quarters battles are occurring regularly. However, despite Ukraine's possible short-term success in the southern and southwestern parts of Kostantinivka, the primary goal of this maneuver was likely to unblock Ukrainian formations and create a corridor for the withdrawal of forces trapped in the northern and central parts of the settlement. Additionally, Russian units are advancing through the fields toward the settlement of Bohdair. As recently as yesterday, much of this territory was considered contested. However, today, new objective control footage confirms firm Russian control over these tree lines and fields. The Ukrainian side has published drone footage of strikes on Russian positions. Regarding the southern Donetsk direction, troop regrouping is currently underway. Over the past 2 or 3 days, no significant updates have come from this direction, which may indicate preparations for a decisive offensive. That's all for now, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and take care.